now, or is it? Oh, okay, you're live, is what it says. We had technical issue here, so let me start over again. Let me start from the very beginning of where we're at. We're at the community kitchen, 411 West Reed. We're at the warming center. I'm going to do our Heritage Baptist Church. We have canceled our services today due to our parking lot is a mess and it's getting messier by the minute. And as the snow continues to fall. And but I'm going to do a short devotional today, this morning, and we're going to delve into Daniel a little bit, the first part of Daniel, and then Mike is going to do a devotional later on tonight, and I'm not for sure what time, but just we will let you know either way. And we're starting off. The reason I find this interesting is how Daniel by a king called Nebuchadnezzar when he was a teenager, and he was brought up to what the equivalent today is you may consider almost a doctorate degree in Nebuchadnezzar's educational status, and he was very intelligent. Nebuchadnezzar uh, only took the people that he needed, uh, intelligent young people that could easily be brainwashed. And he basically had a lot of brainwashing done because he picked intelligent people. He picked people that had skills. He picked maestros and all sorts of them people knew how to chisel statues, stuff, things like that. And but you remember the Babylonian king uh, was also punished too eventually. And we'll look in. Probably won't get to that today. If you want to get further into Daniel and the people, the judges, the kings, the people that were in the line of Christ, please come to our Sunday school class at 9 o'clock Sunday morning at Heritage Baptist Church. And always try to take every opportunity I can to encourage people to come to fellowship with us, come to Sunday school, and fellowship with us at church. And we're going to look at First Daniel chapter 1. And if you open your Bibles, if you got them with you, if you don't have a Bible, let us know. We will find you a Bible. Give us a call or holler or something. We'll get you the Bible if you don't have one. Chapter 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the articles into the treasury, a house of his God. You notice in my version, I use a New King James. In the Old King James, you'll see that the false gods got small g. Remember that. And you got to look at these things, uh, how God uses other nations and other peoples to accomplish His will. A lot of people say things like, "Why me? Why is God doing this to me?" And I'm sure these people said the same thing, and there's obvious reason. One of the reasons is obedience. They were out of obedience. They were worshiping false gods. They were Baal worshiping all the other false gods, and God in the Bible specifically says that uh, it fell in Judah fell into his hand, uh, including some of the articles of the house of God that they took golden figures and different things. You can read deeper into that if you want, and study on your own the different things that happened then in lieu of time. We won't do that today. But and it goes on in verse 3. Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there is no blemish, but good looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. Now, you need, if you have your study Bibles with you or your different things, you can look up who the Chaldeans are. And the kings appointed to them a daily provision of the king's delicacy and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them. So at the end of that time, they might serve before the king. So anyway, they trained all these kids first. They brainwashed them. They trained them first, and now they bring them before the king. Nebuchadnezzar didn't know who they were until now. They brought them in. Now, from among those of the sons of Judah was Daniel, uh, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, if I pronounce these names wrong, that's all right. Don't write down the comments because most they're hard to pronounce. To them, the chief of eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belshazzar. He gave Hananiah, Shadrach, and to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore, he requested of the chief of eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now, God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of eunuchs, and the chief of eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed you your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age, and then you would endanger my head before the king? So Daniel said, what it is if these kids look terrible from lack of nutrition or whatever, uh, this head eunuch could lose his head over it. He could be killed over it. The kings back in them days, like Nebuchadnezzar, did those things. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, uh, uh, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, please take your servants for 10 days and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let your appearances be examined before you, and the appearances of the, got to turn the page here, of the young men who eat a portion of the king's delicacies. And as you see fit, so deal with your servants. So he consented with them in this manner and tested them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portion of delicacies and the wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables. And so we're looking at now these young men, necessarily vegetarian, but they had clean food and unclean food as gone by God's law. Back up into that. And this is a phase of captivity that it was first described in the opening verse as the first phase. That was roughly at about 607 BC. If you got a timeline that you used, 607 BC is approximately was this first phase, and uh, Jehoiakim found to be conquered by Nebuchadnezzar because the Lord gave him into his hand. The king there was fallen into false worship and worshiping false gods, and so uh, God delivered him into his hands to teach him. We see several things there that goes on for the land and culture of captivity in Babylon. Chaldean, Chaldeans, Shinar, it don't matter. Babylon don't matter. Same people, same uh, people that worship false gods, that worship Baals. Uh, it is not a uh, problem there. And these young men, they were selected. Remember from our reading there, they were selected. And what was the reasons they were selected? One of them was they were to be handsome. I'm afraid that takes me and several of my friends that I know out of the question. I'm afraid we would have gotten left behind there. They were wise, quick learners, and able to serve them very well. So he took the cream of the crop. He took the best of their was. You know, they were picked for their potential value and as servants to the king as advisors in lots of important positions. So all of these guys were taken. They were treated not as slaves like they were in Egypt. Remember, in Egypt, they weren't treated real well, but they were taken. When they were taken this time, God still protects His remnant, no matter what. Most of us that are listening today, I about guarantee you, we are the remnant. And God will protect his remnant. He always has, all through the Old Testament. If you read the Old Testament all the way through, God protects his remnant, and he's still going to protect it to this very day. You know, uh, they uh, they were to be trained for 3 years uh, in tongue, learning, and culture of the Chaldeans in order that they'd serve Babylon. Very important in them days to speak the language, you might say. It's kind of important today to speak the language. And uh, so these men were they were exceptional in their areas as they were able to be uh, learn different languages and different customs. And but their source of food and provisions, you know, they were cared for very well in the king's household. I mean, it was the king ate well. It was good to be the king. You eat well, and he expected his captives here to eat well. The king's meat was exceptional to most people, except Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You know, and likely the motive for offering them the king's meat, you know, these young men would have probably have good appetites, and their appetites for good meat met by the king and looked favorably upon his kind provision. And if you all have raised teenagers, I know that most of y'all out there in Facebook land about my age has raised teenagers. You know how they like to eat. They and these teenagers are no different. They like to eat too. And there's a problem here. That meat was unclean, you know, and it was surely part of the plan for them to, as part of the brainwashing, for them to eat this unclean meat. And apparently, there were others other than these four people, these four young kids that were took for their abilities. They too probably fell and then ate the king's meat. They probably fell into that brainwashing. And anyway, uh, like all good teenagers, all need a caretaker. And this was Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs. He was put in charge of them. He was like the head. I'm trying to think of the right word to use. He was like the head. Baby, I hate to use the word babysitters because they weren't babies, but and at their discretion, you know, you may wish to share that it was very likely these young men also were part of the eunuch system, you know, and part of the household of eunuchs, you know, under the care of the master eunuch. You know, these group did four men we mentioned in verse 6. They belonged to different places. They were connected in some way to the royal household of Judah. And because remember, some of that was part of the royal household, and they were took part of that too. And it was implied, you know, all through verses 3, 4, 6, and the phrase "children of Judah." You know, all these was given hints of reference that they were part too of the royalty of Judah. And it's these men were probably um, of royalty. Uh, uh, they were some relation to the former kings of Judah. And so when they were changed, they changed to Babylonian names, which is a lot easier for me to pronounce, which is not necessarily a good thing. But the change of names is part of the brainwashing. attempt at converting them to Babylonian culture. Their names were changed. Daniel uh, means God is my judge. His name was changed to Belshazzar, which means Bel, chief God. There's difference. Look carefully. There's a difference. There's a difference between God is my judge and then my name being changed to chief God. That's part of the brainwashing. Protect the king. Uh, Hananiah means God is gracious. His name was changed to Shadrach, which means inspired of Aku. Aku was moon god. They worshiped the moon. Uh, they worshiped the sun. They worshipped uh, rocks. They worshipped the stars. They had astrologers working there. They were deep into astronomy and different things like that. And uh, and the moon god was a big one. Was one of the big ones. And then Mishael means who is like God, and his name was changed to uh, Machah, which means who is like Aku, and Azariah means God has help. And so all these Babylonian names go back to false gods. They all refer to them as worship of false gods. And the new name here, Abednego, means servant of Nabu. Nabu, Nabu, was the god of wisdom. And so they seek a different God of wisdom than what we do. And they didn't seek the one true God for wisdom. They sought a specific God of wisdom. And all these changes were made in an attempt to remove their allegiance to the one true God. Things that's going on to this very day in our society, there's a lot of things that changes. And there's always a big attempt to remove us older people, and particularly our younger people. They're trying to remove our allegiance to the one true God. They want us to worship false things. They want us to. Now, they're true that our false gods are a little bit different than their false gods, but either the same, it's false God. If you're out worshiping actors and actresses and sports heroes and different things like that. They're trying to run an allegiance to that worshiping. The worst absolute positively thing that I dislike is the worship of uh, politics. We have a big problem. We have a big problem with people wanting to worship politicians, and I just don't agree with that at all. And it's just a big alliance for us to ruin our alliance to the one true God that we need to be. And we'll talk more about some of the other names later on. Daniel's objection to the meeting. He refused to meet, knowing that he would defile him, because the men adhered to the Jewish dietary laws. Now, most of us know quite a bit about the dietary laws of the Jews, but if we look at that carefully, these men, uh, they didn't eat the type of meat that the king ate. They refused to meat, and it could be there's several reasons for it. First of all, it could be an unclean meat. It could be pork. It could be a bottom feeding fish, different things like that. And they knew it defiled them. These men adhered to that law, God's law, and knew that meat, some of that meat had probably all been offered also to the false gods of Babylon, before it was delivered to the tables. That was definitely a big no-no in their view. And he just made one simple request, Daniel said, tell you what I'll do. I'll make a deal with you. You let us eat what we need, what we want. That won't defile us. And if we won't look any worse than we do now. Because the chief of the eunuchs' fear was that they would look bad in front of the king, and then that he would lose not only his job, but he'd also lose his head. And if the king was displeased. So, what influenced that decision? The head of the eunuchs? Uh, it was Daniel. Daniel did things in such a way that he took favor uh, from the king of the eunuch. There's things that we fail at on that to this very day, that we don't always do things to give people favor. And you may not like something. There's a lot of things I don't like. There's a lot of things people, I'm sure you're listening, don't like. There's ways of handling things that can still keep you in good favor. You know, uh, there's lots of things that even in our diets today, a lot of people don't like. There's things that I don't like, but some things you take, uh, you don't have to eat, but you can also be a little polite about it too. I got a friend of mine that every time I mention something she don't like, she looks at me and goes, "Bah!" I'm like, you know what? That's not fair. Because some people like that stuff. And there's ways of doing things. And it's one of our social habits that we've gotten into today of we can say anything we want. I don't care what you say. Well, no, there's a difference. There's a difference in what you think. You do things like that, and I think a whole lot differently. So you got to remember those things. And so anyway, we're going to close this part to an end, and we'll come back Sunday morning. Come to Heritage Baptist Church if you want to learn a little bit more about what happened to Daniel after this. Come 9 o'clock. We have coffee. We will study a little bit more into this. You know, we'll study a little bit more into the essence the Babylonians were seeking to brainwash the best and the brightest of these Jewish people. Thank you.